There is a cold, deeply devastating realization that many of you have endured in the quiet, agonizing moments of your relationships. It is the silent tragedy of looking directly into the eyes of someone for whom you have sacrificed your time, your energy, and the very marrow of your soul, only to find absolutely no admiration looking back at you. Instead of gratitude, you see indifference. Instead of deep, magnetic attraction, you see pity, or worse, a subtle, lingering disdain. You feel a profound, suffocating confusion. You followed all the rules. You were kind, you were patient, you swallowed your anger, and you constantly sacrificed your own needs to make them happy. You were the good partner. And yet, your reward for this endless sacrifice is the agonizing sensation of becoming completely invisible. Listen to me with absolute surgical clarity. Your invisibility is not a moral failing, and your exhaustion is not because you did not give enough. You are failing because modern society has deeply, intentionally infected your mind with the disease of the silent martyr. You have been programmed to believe that total submission and the avoidance of conflict are the highest currencies of love. But the primitive, biological nervous system of the human being standing across from you does not respect submission. The laws of nature, the architecture of human attraction, and the neurobiology of respect only recognize one language: the undeniable, unshakable gravity of your personal sovereignty. Today, we are going to permanently tear down the disease of the martyr. We will dissect the 4 sovereign pillars of respect, the invisible biological architecture that separates the prey from the mountain. We will begin at pillar number 4 and descend into the absolute lethal depths of pillar number 1. Listen to me with deep, chilling reverence. Pillar number 1 is the absolute final frontier of human psychology, and it is the exact place where 90% of people tragically and completely break. They reach this pillar, they stare into the void, and they choose the pathetic comfort of an illusion over the heavy, magnificent weight of their own empire. If you are truly ready to drop the illusion, purge the poison of submission from your blood, and forge a spine of impenetrable iron, walk with me now. Settle your physical body. Anchor the heavy bones of your feet into the solid earth beneath you. Lower your breath deep into the silent, dark cavern of your abdomen, and let the frantic, anxious noise of the modern world completely dissolve into nothingness. To rebuild the indestructible fortress of your respect, we must first examine the foundational crack that causes the entire empire to fall. We must understand the lethal danger of avoiding friction. We begin with the 4th pillar of sovereignty, destroying the illusion of the peacemaker. Pillar number 4 demands the absolute acceptance of friction. In modern relationships, there is a pervasive, highly toxic belief that a healthy dynamic is one where there is no arguing, no tension, and absolute peace at all times. Because you are terrified of losing the person you love, you have adopted the role of the ultimate peacemaker. When your partner crosses a boundary, when they speak to you with a subtle tone of disrespect, or when they completely ignore your needs, your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, fires immediately. Your biology tells you that your perimeter has been breached. You feel the hot, kinetic energy of anger rising in your chest. But then, your unmastered, terrified ego steps in. It whispers to you that if you speak up, if you demand respect, you will create a chaotic argument and they might leave you. So you do the most biologically devastating thing a human being can do. You violently suppress your own voice. You force a fake smile. You tell yourself, "It is not a big deal. I will just let it go to keep the peace." You must understand the brutal neurobiological reality of what actually happens when you do this. You are not keeping the peace. You are actively stockpiling poison inside your own cellular structure. In the natural world, observe the behavior of water. When a river flows heavily and aggressively down a mountain, it crashes violently against the jagged rocks. There is immense friction. There is chaos. But because of this constant movement and collision, the water remains pristine, pure, and full of life. Now, Observe a puddle of water that refuses to move. It sits perfectly still in the forest, avoiding all friction. Within a matter of days, that stagnant water begins to rot. It becomes a breeding ground for parasites, disease, and absolute decay. When you swallow your voice and suppress your boundaries to avoid an argument, you become the stagnant water. The anger you suppressed does not magically disappear. It becomes trapped in your nervous system, slowly mutating into a dark, heavy resentment. You begin to rot from the inside out. But the tragedy does not end with your internal decay. We must look at how the other person's biology responds to your absolute lack of friction. Human beings, much like the physical universe, require a solid object to push against in order to gauge reality. If a person leans their full body weight against a concrete wall, the wall pushes back with equal force, and the person feels secure. But if they lean against a wall made of thin paper, they fall right through it. When your partner tests your boundaries with a disrespectful comment, their primitive limbic system is unconsciously searching for the concrete wall. They are testing the structural integrity of your masculine or feminine frame. When you smile and say nothing, you prove that you are made of paper. In that exact millisecond, an invisible, catastrophic transaction takes place. Because you offered zero friction, their nervous system registers that you place no value on your own territory, and it is a cold, undeniable law of human psychology. No one will ever respect a territory that the king himself refuses to defend. You believe you are showing them unconditional love by being infinitely patient, but they are subconsciously losing all romantic and biological attraction to you. They begin to view you not as a sovereign equal, but as a submissive extension of their own will. The dynamic shifts from a passionate, magnetic polarity into the exhausting, passionless dynamic of a parent managing a timid child. To command absolute respect, you must eradicate the illusion of the peacemaker from your mind. You must realize that true, profound peace on the other side of the mountain can only be achieved by walking directly through the storm. You must embrace the heavy, uncomfortable discipline of immediate friction. When a boundary is crossed, you do not wait. You do not let it fester. You do not wait until tomorrow to bring it up. You anchor yourself in the present moment. You look them directly in the eyes with cold, unblinking neutrality, and you introduce the friction. I do not appreciate the tone you just used. Do not speak to me like that again. You do not yell. You do not scream. You speak with the heavy, unshakable gravity of stone. When you willingly introduce this tension into the room, you are sending a massive, undeniable biological signal to their brain. You are telling them, I love you, but I love my own sovereignty infinitely more. My borders are guarded. My empire is secure. It is in this exact moment of friction that true, visceral respect is born. You have mapped the danger of the stagnant water. You have accepted the necessity of the storm, and you have reclaimed the perimeter of your empire by destroying the illusion of the peacemaker. You now understand that a boundary without friction is merely a suggestion, and you have committed to defending your borders with the heavy, unshakable gravity of stone. But simply defending the walls of your castle is completely meaningless if you are willingly leaving the vault wide open and giving away the pure gold inside for free. We must now dissect the fatal flaw of your unregulated generosity. This brings us to the third pillar of sovereignty, and the absolute, unforgiving neurobiology of human value. We must destroy the inflation of access. Pillar number 3 demands the sacred restriction of your presence. Modern relationship culture, poisoned by the constant connectivity of smartphones and social media, has completely distorted your understanding of what it means to be present for the person you love. You have been aggressively conditioned to believe that unconditional love requires unconditional access. You believe that to prove your devotion, you must be available to them 24 hours a day. When their name appears on your phone, you drop whatever you are doing and reply within 3 seconds. When they want to see you, you immediately cancel your own plans. You sacrifice your gym routine. You abandon your personal purpose, and you mold your entire schedule around their convenience. You do this because your unmastered ego is terrified of being forgotten. You believe that by overwhelming them with your presence, your support, and your attention, you will become so incredibly useful that they will never leave you. You must look at this behavior through the cold, clinical lens of biological habituation and behavioral economics. In the financial world, there is a devastating phenomenon known as hyperinflation. When a central bank panics and begins to print an unlimited, endless supply of paper money, flooding the streets with currency, what happens to the value of that money? It instantly plummets to zero. It becomes completely worthless. People begin to sweep it into the gutter like trash. The money did not change its physical shape, but because it became infinitely accessible, it lost all of its purchasing power. True value in the physical universe is intrinsically, undeniably tied to scarcity and the difficulty of acquisition. Gold is highly valued because it is dense, rare, and requires immense, back-breaking friction to extract from the earth. Dirt is worthless because it is everywhere. When you offer a human being unlimited, unconditional, and immediate access to your vital energy, you are causing a catastrophic hyperinflation of your own worth. You are printing endless currency. Let us examine the neurobiology of this transaction. The human brain's reward system is driven by dopamine. Dopamine is not the chemical of sustained happiness. It is the chemical of pursuit, of anticipation, and of the hunt. The primitive brain is highly stimulated by unpredictability and the space between a desire and its fulfillment. When a stimulus becomes perfectly constant and guaranteed, the brain deploys a mechanism called sensory habituation. If you walk into a room with a loud, humming air conditioner, the noise is initially distracting. But after 30 minutes, your brain completely filters the noise out. You literally stop hearing it. It becomes invisible background noise. This is exactly what happens to your partner's nervous system when you are infinitely available. Because your attention is guaranteed, their dopamine circuit completely flatlines. They no longer feel the thrilling magnetic pull to pursue you because there is absolutely nothing left to pursue. You have removed all the necessary space from the dynamic. You have suffocated the fire by throwing too much wood onto it, leaving no oxygen for the flames to breathe. They stop seeing you as a sovereign, mysterious mountain, and they begin to tune you out like the humming of a cheap machine. You become invisible background noise in your own relationship. You justify your constant availability by telling yourself that you are being a safe harbor for them. But you must understand the architecture of a true harbor. A safe harbor is a massive, immovable structure made of deep stone and heavy earth. It does not move. When a ship is caught in a violent storm, the ship must actively navigate the treacherous waters and sail to the harbor to find refuge. The harbor does not detach itself from the earth and desperately paddle out into the ocean like a frantic, pathetic lifeboat, looking for ships to save. When you abandon your own purpose to constantly cater to their emotional fluctuations, you are not a safe harbor, you are a lifeboat. And nobody deeply respects a lifeboat. They merely use it until the storm passes, and then they leave it tied to a wooden dock and forget about it. To command the absolute magnetic respect of your partner, you must look to the ancient architecture of the Shaolin temple. The Grand Masters of Shaolin possess some of the most profound, life-altering wisdom on the planet. But you will never see a Shaolin master standing on a crowded street corner in a noisy city, desperately handing out flyers, begging random strangers to listen to him. If he did that, the modern world would treat his sacred wisdom like absolute garbage. Instead, the temple is built high up in the treacherous, freezing peaks of the mountains. If a student desires the wisdom of the master does not come down. The student must climb the thousands of steep, agonizing stone steps. They must endure the burning in their lungs and the aching in their legs. The sheer physical friction of the journey is what prepares the student's nervous system to properly revere and respect the wisdom once they finally arrive. The restriction of access creates the reverence. Your vital energy, your time, and your deep emotional attention are the sacred wisdom of your internal temple. You must stop handing them out on the street corner of your relationship. You must forcefully restrict access. You must reclaim your absolute commitment to your own physical and spiritual purpose. When you are engaged in your work, your training, or your silent meditation, you do not exist to the outside world. The phone remains unanswered. The text message waits. You must become completely comfortable with letting your partner experience the quiet, healthy anxiety of your absence. You must allow them to feel the space. You must give them the biological opportunity to climb the steps of the mountain to reach you. When you finally grant them your attention, it will not be perceived as cheap, hyperinflated currency. It will be received as heavy, precious gold. You have successfully stopped the hyperinflation of your presence. You have rebuilt the heavy stone steps leading up to your internal temple, transforming your constant anxious availability into the magnetic, undeniable gravity of the mountain. Your borders are now defended by the fierce discipline of friction, and your presence is deeply valued through the sacred law of scarcity. But managing your presence and guarding your gates is utterly meaningless if, the exact moment you are actually standing with your partner, you are actively destroying their capacity to grow by doing all of the heavy lifting yourself. We must now dissect the insidious, exhausting dynamic of the parasite and the host. This brings us to the second pillar of sovereignty and the absolute destruction of the myth of exhaustive effort. Pillar number 2 demands the terrifying discipline of stepping back. There is a deeply pathological narrative woven into the fabric of modern romance. You have been taught that a successful relationship requires relentless, backbreaking, hard work. You have been conditioned to believe that if your partner is struggling, if they are failing to regulate their own emotions, or if they are dropping the ball on their responsibilities, the ultimate proof of your love is to instantly rush in and carry their burden for them. When they give 20%, your unmastered ego frantically rushes in to give 80% to keep the system afloat. You manage their schedules, you soothe their unprovoked anxieties, you constantly initiate the difficult conversations, and you meticulously navigate the logistics of your shared life. You act as the perpetual savior. You do this because deep down, you believe that if you make yourself incredibly useful, if you become the flawless manager of their existence, they will look at you with profound gratitude and shower you with respect. This is a catastrophic, biological delusion. You must understand the brutal psychology of what actually happens when you overfunction to compensate for a partner who is underfunctioning. When you strip a human being of the heavy, necessary friction of their own responsibilities, you do not elevate them, you psychologically amputate them. You initiate a deeply toxic biological transaction known as the parent-child dynamic. The moment you take over the emotional and logistical heavy lifting, your partner's nervous system unconsciously shifts into the role of an infantile dependent. They realize on a primitive level that they no longer need to burn their own metabolic energy to survive the relationship, because you are frantically running around doing all the work for both of you. They become the biological parasite, and you become the exhausted, bleeding host. Let us examine the devastating impact this has on magnetic polarity and romantic respect. It is a cold, inescapable law of human biology. You cannot feel passionate, burning, sexual, or magnetic attraction to a dependent child that you must constantly manage. You only feel bone-deep exhaustion, heavy resentment and pity. And simultaneously, you must look at how they view you. They do not look at your exhaustive effort and see a powerful, sovereign king or queen. They look at you and see an anxious, terrified servant desperately trying to earn your keep. They lose all biological respect for you because true respect is only given to an equal who commands the space, not to a frantic manager who is terrified the ship will sink if they stop rowing. By doing everything for them, you have completely destroyed the space required for them to step up and be a sovereign adult. To break this exhausting cycle and reclaim the absolute respect of your environment, you must deploy one of the most profound, advanced concepts of ancient Eastern philosophy, the discipline of Wu Wei. In the philosophical traditions of the Tao and the Shaolin martial arts, Wu Wei is often translated as non-action or effortless action. The unmastered modern mind completely misunderstands this. You hear non-action, and you think it means laziness, apathy, or cowardly surrender. You could not be more wrong. Wu Wei is the highest, most terrifying echelon of active psychological discipline. It requires infinitely more spiritual strength to stand perfectly still and watch someone struggle with their own weight than it does to frantically rush in and save them. Wu Wei is the profound realization that you cannot push the river. The river flows at its own pace. If you jump into the violent rapids and try to push the water faster with your bare hands, you will not change the course of the river. You will simply drown from exhaustion. When you apply Wu Wei to a relationship, you completely drop the heavy rope of exhaustive effort. If your partner is emotionally dysregulated and attempting to pull you into their chaotic storm, the unmastered mind pulls the rope back, arguing and trying to fix their mood. The sovereign master simply lets go of the rope entirely. Without your kinetic resistance to pull against, their chaotic energy collapses under its own weight. You must practice the agonizing discipline of stepping back. You must allow the silences to be awkward without rushing to fill them with your words. You must allow the logistics to fail if your partner refuses to carry their half of the burden. If they drop the ball, you do not frantically dive to the floor to catch it. You let the ball hit the ground. You let them feel the heavy, uncomfortable consequence of their own inaction. This is terrifying for the weak ego, because the ego asks, but what if I step back and they do not step up? What if the ship sinks? If you step back and the other person refuses to row and the ship begins to sink, then you have just acquired the most valuable, objective data in the universe. You have just discovered that you are the only one keeping the illusion alive. A sovereign mountain does not row a two-person boat by itself. If they refuse to carry their own biological and emotional weight, you must possess the absolute clarity to let the illusion drown. By executing Wu Wei, you force the dynamic back into reality. You force them to either stand up as a sovereign adult and meet you at the peak of the mountain, or stay at the bottom of the valley where they belong. The moment you stop managing their life, you instantly regain your mystery, your energy, and the heavy gravity of your own respect. You have mastered the necessity of friction, permanently destroying the disease of the peacemaker. You have mastered the sacred restriction of access, ending the pathetic hyperinflation of your presence. You have mastered the absolute discipline of Wu Wei, dropping the exhausting burden of the parent-child dynamic and forcing your partner to carry their own biological weight. Your borders are now made of iron. Your vital energy is deeply contained, and you are operating as a true, untouchable sovereign. But all of this profound philosophical architecture, all of this emotional discipline, and all of this newly acquired strength means absolutely nothing if you fail at the final, ultimate test. We are now approaching the absolute abyss of human psychology. We must now march into the cold, terrifying execution chamber where 90% of humanity completely and tragically surrenders their soul. This brings us to the first pillar of sovereignty, the absolute capacity for departure. You must deeply internalize a cold, unforgiving rule of human interaction. A boundary, without a severe, enforced consequence, is not a boundary. It is a suggestion. And a suggestion, in the eyes of a person who is constantly testing your limits, is an open invitation to invade. If the person standing across from you knows, deep within the primal, unconscious architecture of their limbic system, that you are terrified of being alone, and that you will never actually leave them regardless of how much they disrespect you, then you possess absolutely zero leverage. You are not a sovereign equal, you are a biological hostage. They will look at your anger, they will listen to your complaints, and they will completely ignore them, because they know that your words are entirely empty. They know that you do not possess the heavy, terrifying capacity to walk away. This is exactly where 90% of people catastrophically break. They do the work to establish the first three pillars. They state their boundary clearly. But the moment the partner inevitably tests that boundary, violently crossing the line to see if the wall is made of stone or paper, the unmastered individual panics. They threaten to leave. They pack a bag. They walk out the door. But they do not stay gone. We must dissect the brutal neurobiology of what happens to you in the immediate aftermath of walking away. We must understand the psychological terror of the void. When you face profound disrespect and you finally turn your back, close the heavy iron door and walk away, you step directly into the void. The void is the immediate, freezing, echoing silence of isolation. Your brain, which has spent months or years heavily addicted to the predictable dopamine and oxytocin of that relationship, even if the relationship was deeply toxic, suddenly experiences a massive, catastrophic chemical crash. As you sit alone in your quiet room, your cortisol levels rapidly spike, inducing a profound state of biological panic. Your chest tightens, your hands feel cold. Your primitive biology screams at you that you are in mortal danger because you have separated from the pack. In this freezing void, your own unmastered ego becomes your deadliest enemy. Terrified of the silence, your mind will begin to actively lie to you. It will whisper insidious, poisonous doubts into your consciousness. It will say, maybe you were too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe you misunderstood their tone. If you do not send them a message right now, you might lose them forever. You will feel a desperate, burning, almost uncontrollable urge to pick up your phone, to apologize for holding your own boundary, and to furiously rebuild the bridge you just burned. If you surrender to this urge, if you break the magnificent silence and crawl back to a person who systematically disrespected you, without them experiencing the absolute terror of your prolonged absence and offering a profound, undeniable change in behavior, you commit the ultimate act of self-betrayal. Listen to the cold physics of human respect. The exact millisecond you go back to apologize for a boundary they violated, you prove to their primitive nervous system that your rules are completely fake. You teach them that they can abuse you, ignore you, and disrespect your territory, and you will still return to them like an obedient, terrified dog seeking a scrap of affection. If you do this, the respect will not just be dead, it will be buried under a mountain of ash. You will have permanently traded your masculine or feminine sovereignty for the pathetic, temporary comfort of an illusion. To hold the first pillar, you must become the absolute master of the void. You must sit heavily in the agonizing silence of your room and allow your biology to chemically detoxify. You must treat the anxiety in your chest not as a command to act, but as a passing storm in the natural world. You anchor your breathing deep into the dark cavern of your dantian. You must repeat to yourself the cold, objective truth. You are not dying, you are healing. The pain you feel is the weakness leaving your nervous system. The sovereign mind understands that true, magnificent gravity is forged exclusively in the fires of solitude. When you realize that you are entirely capable of surviving the silence, when you realize that you do not need to absorb poison just to have someone sit next to you on the couch, you become absolutely invincible. You become a person who cannot be manipulated, because you are no longer terrified of losing someone who does not value your soul. You are willing to lose the relationship in order to save the empire. I know the agonizing, invisible exhaustion many of you have been carrying deep inside your cellular structure for all these years. I know the profound, quiet tragedy of spending your entire existence desperately trying to be the perfect, accommodating partner. You have burned the pure, liquid gold of your life force, attempting to carry the weight of the world on your back, constantly managing their emotions, suppressing your own voice, and avoiding every possible conflict, only to be treated as if you are completely invisible. You have spent countless nights lying awake in the dark, analyzing every word you said, desperately trying to figure out what you did wrong to earn such cold indifference. You were taught by a broken society that being a silent martyr was the ultimate expression of love. You were lied to. Shrinking your physical and psychological presence to accommodate the disrespect of others did not earn you their admiration. It merely invited them to comfortably consume your space. It was the exact friction that kept you chained to a life of quiet desperation, feeling hollowed out in your own home. But the era of your desperate reactive submission is now officially, permanently dead. The biological hemorrhage has been stopped, you now possess the ancient, heavy, invisible architecture of the untouchable mind. You understand the necessity of friction and the danger of the stagnant water. You have restricted your access, transforming your presence from cheap currency into heavy gold. You have embraced the discipline of Wu Wei, dropping the exhausting burden of the parent-child dynamic. And you have ruthlessly executed the fear of the void, assuming the terrifying, magnificent weight of the first pillar, possessing the absolute lethal capacity to walk away. The stages of the world are already built for tomorrow. The relationships you navigate and the inevitable tests of your sovereignty are actively waiting for you to walk through the door. Tomorrow morning, when the shadow of disrespect crosses your path and violently tests the integrity of your stone walls, what will you do? Will you shrink your posture, force a pathetic smile, and surrender the gold of your vital energy just to avoid the temporary discomfort of standing alone? Or will you embrace the terrifying discipline of the void, hold the iron gates closed, and speak with the undeniable, lethal weight of the mountain? The choice is yours. The path is open. Amituofo.